Yes, I have to go, but that's fine. So just record this one. The question 9 here, the answer is A. Is it A correct? Where do you find the evidence for the A? Right, is that where you find the evidence? So the cross A1 is more successful, generally more successful size, right? Well, so that's how I do this question. You check the answers one by one and check the graph to see, or the table, right? Check the data to see whether it's accurate or not. Right? The check statement is the statement is factually correct. So general more successful matching the size, and then I'll match the color. Is correct. The A answer is correct. If you're lucky, right? Usually the A answer is just the correct answer. Or even the A answer is wrong, but you will see that, like, oh, that's the pattern. You will be able to find the right answer. Easier to find the right answer as well. So that's a very typical graph question. Check the statements one by one. And also importantly, right, when you read the tables, read carefully, make sure you read everything, right? Don't try to calculate, compare them by yourself. They usually have like a general average data. And question 10 here, the answer will be B. Can you get to the B? Did you get to the B answer? The answer is correct, right? The other answer is wrong. But B answer just makes sense. So that's an inference question as well. So see that how that how you can make that inference, right, from the test. The table, right, the graph and the table, the passage only have data like that. But the other answers are wrong. They're not improving, right? We can't see any steadily improving. That's wrong. Differently, they're being observed. That's wrong, right? That's not mentioned. That's not included in the graph and table. We don't see that evidence at all, that data at all. The inference outcome of scientific trials analyzed by varying their teaching method. No, we don't see that variables. So you can see that like elements, right? We say that when you read a science article, you need to pay attention to the elements. What's the study elements? What's the elements that's being studied and focused here in this passage, right? So these elements, they're like outsider. They're very other variables not included in the study at all, not included in that table at all. So they must be wrong. And B answer, researchers can see evidence of learning even when an animal's performance on the task is inconsistent during the observation. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense. So don't try to predict an answer because you cannot predict an answer like that. So don't try to predict one. Why bother? Just keep that in mind. Like another reason why I asked you don't try to predict an answer is that like when you predict an answer, you're actually narrowing down your answer choices. Right? You are like you tend to become a bit prejudiced or biased. You become narrow-minded instead of being open-minded and flexible. Very important mindset on the SAT is like to be flexible and be open-minded. So I think that's a good thing about the SAT as well, like to have to really like be critical thinking, but also be very open to any options, any possible correct answers. Okay, any possibility. And question 11, the answer would be the C. Quickly. Again, right? That's the best answer. The other answer is just wrong. But how do we get that quickly? Okay. Learn to complete the matching task. How to justify that quickly? Can anyone try to explain? Did you choose C? How do you can justify that from the graph? Cindy, do you have an answer?
Cause I guess the results is quite high, and it didn't win. Yeah, so like ever since session 1 it was quite high. So I think they got to learn the skill pretty quickly.
Yep, that makes sense, right? Again, that makes sense. So that's something you need to be able to justify and explain the answer. Why it doesn't make sense, why it is correct. So you need to know why it is correct as well. So when you see an answer like that, probably couldn't think about that at first, like by yourself, but when you see the answer, think, that makes sense, right? Like quickly. Yeah, probably that could be correct, like because they learned it's quite high from the very beginning, right? And they didn't drop, so it's not luck. They learned that, right, along the way. So that's quickly complete the matching task. Okay, good, very good. Next one. How about this one? Do you find it hard or easier to understand? Right, that's a general science article, so it's not focusing on one particular study. Right, so you talk about but it's more technical, of course. Supermassive black hole, right? Talking about a supermassive black hole. So let's have a look at the answers here. Question 1, the answer is B. Oh, sorry, it is a study report. It is also a study report. So it's about the new stuff. For the first time, right? The spin rate of black hole with a mass of 2 million times that of our sun. Let's focus on those particular studies. The findings. Important field of black hole scientists, right? So that's something, yeah, that's also like these observations. That's also studies. Implication for recent studies. Question 2, answer C. Basic hypothesis that they hope to validate through the study of experiment. Probably, most probably thought of. That's also like a sign of an inference question. So most likely, most probably. Remember, that's something not directly mentioned, but it is, again, it makes sense. It is deductible, right? We can get to that conclusion. We can infer. 29. The question is very tremendous here, right? It must means like also like the very big gigantic, very big. And then like question 4 here, the answer will be A as well. Monster. The other answer is just wrong. Okay. Question 5. The answer is A. Question 6, the answer is A. Question 7, the answer is D. Question 8, the answer is A. And question 9, the answer is D. Question 10, the answer is A. And question 11, the answer is D. Yep. Any question? Oh, good. All right. That's good. So let's move on to the next one. Question 1, the answer is D. Question 2, the answer is A. Question 3, the answer is B. Question 4, the answer is C. And question 5, the answer is D. Question 6, the answer is C. Question 7, the answer is D. And question 8, the answer is B. Question 9, the answer is A. And question 10, the answer is B and C. All right, okay. So that's level 2. So what I need you to do, like for the level 4, I want you to send me your answers. All right, so give me your answers of the level 4, and I will correct that by, for you. So, and we can talk about that. So we can have a look at your how you did for the level 4, like the science articles, and also and then I will send it to you, send the answers to you. So what do you think about the science article right now? Like, with this practice, do you getting better, like getting more familiar with this kind of like articles, right? The scientific reading, right? Scientific articles. What's the question type? So let's take a break now, and we come back. We do some social science reading as well. Okay. So let's take a break. If you have the answers ready, like you can send it to me, the level 4, or you can send me later. Okay. Yep. See you later. Like come back at 12. Come back at 12. Evelyn's back. Yep. So Vincent, hello. So let's have a look at this one. So this is I'm sending you this documents as well. Like this is a vocabulary list. And that vocabulary list is like this regarding to the science and the social science. It is like the adjective words, right? Obscure words, hard words. So you can go through them, right? Some of them like you probably have learned that as well in school, but some of them just maybe not so sure. Like so you can go through them and understand the meaning, sedentary, right? And they're like empirical, right? In that science context, it's also you also need to know like what does that mean in the science context. If you like say empirical data, right? That means what? That means that like that data is directly from observation, from experiment, right? Rather than just pure theory. So that's the difference. So you need to get familiar with this wording as well, the meaning of this wording. Okay, so I'm sending you this article, this documents. So it's only 45 words. So you can quickly go through them too. Also, like I said, I think it's a good way to like expand your vocabulary as well. Okay. So that's one of the, give you the idea about this one. So now we move on to the social science articles. So in the social science article, it's actually quite similar to the natural science one. So we talk about that together. But sometimes social science might be easier because it talk about the issues related to more relevant to our everyday life. But sometimes it could be hard as well. So let's do some hard one in class together. So for example, like this one is easier because it's like the human health, right? But sometimes if we're talking about that's about physical activity. Oh, not this one, sorry. Maybe we move on to the, let me think. So let's do this one first, level 3. Go to level 3. So this is like the easier one. This passage one's the easier one because it's like a cute things, right? So what is considered kawaii or some kind of thing. So it's more relatable when you read that. You feel, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can feel it, rather than like a massive black hole, right? That kind of subject, that kind of like topic issues. Or political communication, right? Politics. That's also a very common topic in the science, social science articles. But when it comes to the culture and linguistic, it can get a bit harder. So let's try this one. We do this one together. So again, you do it first and we talk about that together. So now the time is 12:04 and you start now. Give you like 12 minutes, about 12 minutes. 5, 5 minutes past. Ten minutes past. All right, time's up. Finish. So that's 12 minutes for the social science article. So on the exam days, right, when you have like a social science article, like I mentioned, it's usually the article that like you would prefer to spend less time and spare more time for the other one. But of course, it still depends on the level, like the type of article as well. So this one is relatively hard compared to the other more easier type of like social articles, social science article, but it is still like a manageable. That's something you need to think about. So when you read the article again, right, the method is the same as the science one. Read it paragraph by paragraph. And if it's studies, you focus on the studies, right? They also have like the process of the studies and the findings and then conclusion, right? More general, like a further explanation, that kind of things. And like the background information, also including the background information before the studies. And read it paragraph by paragraph by identifying the key points and also like follow the author's logic here. So when you read this one, the first body paragraph, right? So it is talking about, and read the introduction, right? Dynamics of culture transmission in Native Americans of high-grade plain. So culture transmission, culture. So it's about culture, Native American. So all these elements, right? Like the proper nouns, you pay attention to that. High-grade plains. So let's read, like if we quickly go through like the first paragraph, for example, let's just read the first paragraph. A study goes understanding the distribution of cultural elements in Native American communities during the historical period of the Great Plains would seem a most challenging ones. Right, so read that sentence. Now do you focus on the subject and the verb? So no matter how long it is, like understanding this distribution of cultural elements, which seems the most challenging one in that, right? Famously, there is a mixture of powerful internal and external factors, creating a similarly distinctive set of shared elements from a linguistically diverse set of people. Does that make sense? Right, so try to get again, right, hold on to this background information and try to get your head around these new concepts. Different factors, external and internal factors, right, creating a similar distinctive set of shared elements from a linguistically diverse set of people. So they speak different language, but they have a shared set of culture elements, right? Shared elements, shared culture, sort of like that. So also get used to the paraphrasing. So it's a very, this is sort of like a, I think they have a tendency, or this article, they have a tendency, they will change the different, they will use the different wordings to refer to the similar ideas, the concept. So we need to be able to identify that, like that's still just talking about a culture, right? So here, like that's what we're talking about, how culture, not sure, just keep reading. So this is known across the world as the Great Plain culture. Okay, so that set of shared elements, right? So that's culture elements. In our study, okay, finally, our study. So that's a background information, right? See that in our study. So what's the focus of our study? That's something we already know. We know that like there is a Great Plain culture, but our study used the quantitative analysis show how different process operating on two sets of culture traits among the 9 high plain groups. So like how different process operated on 2 sets of culture traits. So that's the finding, right? Again, the general findings of the brief introduction of the studies. The studies focus on 2 culture traits, right? And then like they focus on the how different process operating on that 2 culture traits. So be sensitive to the wording here. Moccasin decoration. Okay. Exhibit a pattern consistent with geographically mediate between group interaction. Geographically. So again, another key words show up, another element show up. All right. So what does that? Geographically mediated. Related, or I can think about like geographic related between groups interaction. However, consistent with that. So that's a sentence that's talking about the relationship. However, group variation in religious ceremony of sand-downs also reveal evidence of purifying culture selection associated with historical bias. So these are the key words. Identify them and try to make sense of the sentence here, like dividing down ancient linguistic lines. So that's like historical bias, and that's related to the linguistic. So if you quickly translate that language here, convert that into a more simpler, understandable language, does that mean that like, oh, Moccasin decoration, consistent with the geography, sand downs, consistent with linguistic or historical bias, something like that, like related to the linguistic. So that's something about that, right? So let's identify that. But again, that's just a brief introduction. We can, the details of the studies, right? We will definitely explain later. So you don't have to really like gather like the final answer or the conclusion of like what it's trying to say, but you just think of like process this information, identify these keywords, mark, right? Just to highlight this. And for later on, you need to refer back to the same. You can come back and have a look, see whether that's what it's talking about. The later shows that while the later, so the sand downs. So do you understand that like the sand downs and the Moccasin decoration, what's their relationship? Right, they are probably, is that two sets of cultural traits. Right, so that two cultural traits refers to the Moccasin decoration and the sand downs. So the later here refers to sand downs, shows that while the conglomeration of like plain culture may have been a product of merging new ideas with old, combined with culture interchange between groups, the details of what was accepted or rejected or elaborated in each case reflect pre-existing ideological bias. If you get it, awesome. If you don't get it, fine, highlight that. The author made a point here, right? Although culture may sometimes, so the author will definitely elaborate on that. So they make a point, right? Then, but we know that's a new point, right? So that's something, why highlight that? Because that's a new point. That's not mentioned something before. It's saying that like the sand downs demonstrate something. So although culture may sometimes be a melting pot, the analysis, so our studies show that even in highly fluid situation, culture mosaic may be integrated, shaped, indirectly shaped by the historical factors that are not always obvious. Does that sentence make sense? It is tested, right? It is, so you have to make sense of that. You have to understand that sentence. So if you get it, great. If you don't get it, like that's fine. We mark it and we can come back later. Culture is right, information. So again, background information. Start over, like, so that's actually the first paragraph. Again, talk about the brief introduce the studies, right? The conclusion and the general final studies, and also like background information. But this part is also like background information. Culture is the information, right? What is culture? The definition of culture, and this shared property. So hold on to that, right? Really try to understand what is culture according to the author's definition. So this shared property characterizes all human society. Communities that came to occupy exemplify the manner in which human can take existing idea, elaborate them, combine them with new ones, pass them successfully between groups, right? and create novel distinct pattern, visible and temporal like spiritual scales. Attempting to examine the role of specific factors in creating cultural patterns under such historically continuous transcendence, however, present a challenge. Okay, so that's the focus of this paragraph, right? Talk about the background information, but also talk about analyzing that is a challenge because there's too many factors, the role of specific factors in such a dynamic environment. Here, analysis have shown the presence of distinct process operating and ultimately influencing the representation of cultural traits in different tribes. Analysis have shown they have a distinct process, all right, influencing the representation of cultural traits in different tribes. Patterns of similarity and difference in moccasin design. So focus on the moccasin design. Shows a statistically significant relationship with model of geographic relationship amount between tribes. Okay, try to understand this language. So get used to the scientific language and try to translate that into a sentence that you easier, simplify the sentence without changing the meaning. So what does that statistically significant relationship, right? Basically, it means that they have some relationship, right? And what's that relationship between something and something, right? Think about elements and the relationship. So what's the elements? Geographic, right? And moccasin design. They are the elements. So what does that mean? They have relationship, right? And consider the refer back to something that is mentioned here. Pattern consistent with geographic between group interaction, right? That's a final finding. We know that. That means what? Okay, yep, I get it. You're saying that the analysis shows that, right? Shows connections, consistent relationship between the geography. So geography will sort of right, we don't say cause effect, but they have relationship, right? They have the system consistent with each other. So no statistical effects of language. So there's another factors here, language. So no language affiliation on the distribution of moccasin decoration was detected. Does that make sense? So they find out the geography has connections consistent with the moccasin design, but they don't find any patterns with the language, right? So that's it. That's what you need to get. Don't infer too much. Just stay there. Use the origin wording. That's fine. And then this indicates, so the author tells you, what does that mean? This indicates that the representation of moccasin decoration type among groups is in the case most strongly determined by whether or not this trace is presented in another geographically proximate tribe. So that means what? Yeah, geography will, right, design the moccasin design. So whether they are live where this tribe they are closer by, right? If they're closer by, they share the same moccasin design. But that's what that means. So you get the idea, right? So again, you really try to get your head around this concept, more so get used to these wordings, and again, make sure you can process this information more efficiently, right? And then, in other words, selection bias have not disrupted the distribution of this decoration to the extent that they deviate significantly from the pattern predicted on the basis of the geographic relationship between the tribes alone. What does that mean? In other words, selection bias have not disrupted to the extent that they deviate significantly from the pattern predictable on the basis of Can you get it? Can you get the idea here? All right. So you can really try to, if you can get it immediately, oh, it's great, good, right? That's about like reading sentence ability. But if you don't fully get it, that's fine as well. So I'm telling you that like, you don't have to really understand every single sentence because you have the time limit. So I don't want you to spend too much time on the reading, try to make sense of every single sentence, and then like later on you don't have enough time to do other questions. No, don't do that, right? So this sentence is basically in other words, right? So it's still saying the same thing, and then that's fine as long as you get the first idea. That's still saying the same thing, right? Like geography would, right? Like the selection of the traits depends on the geography, depends on that element. They're just using different words to say that. That's actually what it means as well. If you read that now, like the selection bias. Selection bias is a terminology, right? But you can try to guess what does that mean, right? It's just selection, right? The selection would not have disrupted the distribution of this decoration. So how would they select the decoration, right? How would they select the decoration? Would not be disrupt the distribution of this decoration, would not like change the distribution to the extent that like they get influenced by the geographic relationship. So basically it's like that. Deviation from the pattern predictable on the basis like, so the selection bias would not disrupt the decoration, like the distribution of the decoration to the extent that like they got influenced by the geography. So still the same thing. So this result would seems to reaffirm the role of intergroup relations in creating a pattern of shared cultural similarity over the region, which many have obviously discussed. So this study, the Moccasin design, is consistent with, right? It is like saying that like reaffirm the role of intergroup relation. Previous discussed, many have previously reconfirmed. So that's something like have been previous study as well. Like they will have like a lot of like interchange between the groups, right? Intergroups, interrelation. They have like shared cultural similarity because they are geographic, right? Proximate. So they are closer by, so they can share their like some of the cultural elements. So that's what that means. Behavioral variation between tribes in terms of their practice of religion ceremony of sandowns. So now I'm pretty sure like that's the second trait, right? So that's a relationship between the Moccasin design and the sandowns. Also indicate a statistically relationship with geography. So it has also have like geography relationship. So again, are you drawing up? Can you draw sort of like a diagram in your mind, right? So they seem that like geography also have something to do with the sandowns. But again, reiterate the role of inter-tribe transmission. So now we know that like the geography means inter-tribe, right? According to the author, right? They are the same. That indicates inter-tribe transmission, creating like the grid. However, pattern of inter-tribe variation element also is a bit in a statistically significant relationship with linguistic. Also, there's another factor relevant to that as well. Linguistic between the different tribes. Ordinarily, this pattern might simply be attributed to the fact that tribes with the more mutually comprehensible language were able to more effectively transmit the behavioral variation among themselves. Does that make sense? So like ordinarily, right? So common sensely, right? Like we would know that like, yeah, fine. Of course, if you speak same language, right? It's easier to transmit the elements. Here, however, language patterns were found not to correlate with geographic pattern. What does that mean? And moreover, the statistical relationship between send-downs, patterning, and linguistic affiliation was found to still hold even when the geography was controlled for. So that's a scientific language again, controlled for. What does that mean? And also like the, right? Something was still hold while something was controlled for. The relationship between the like is therefore puzzling. Okay, that's the end. So do you know what that means? What that sentence mean? Anyone can try to like interpret this sentence. Translate that sentence or like the right simplify. Yeah, okay. Who's want to try?
Yeah.
Yeah, give it a go.
So it's saying that the Sundance and the okay, so the Sundance patterns and linguistics have a connection. But linguistics do not necessarily have a connection to geography. And so Sundance does not necessarily have a connection to geography.
Oh, hold on. Be careful about that inference. So does that mean that
No.
does it mean like refute the previous sentence here? So there's no relationship between the.
No, it says even when geography is controlled. So like when geography is like a independent factor, it's yeah.
The linguistic. So
Was,
yeah, so that's something be careful, right? So geography, of course, would have some influence to like what can affect the send downs. That's another statement, right? That's another point that is already mentioned here. They have like statistical relationships, so that is being proven. But what is interesting here is that's not the only factors, right? So linguistic is also a factors. But what is even more interesting here is that linguistic factors has nothing to do with the geography. So that's what that means, right? So that's they don't have a relationship when you consider linguistic factor. So control for, yeah, that's control for means what? So you don't, if you get rid of like remove the geographic factor. So no matter how close or how far they live with each other, as long as they have the same like the language, they will have some shared send downs, some shared send downs elements. Does that make sense? So that's what that control for means. So that means what? That means that like the right, so control, right? For like that's a control is an interesting is an important science concept that I actually want you to really like understand that. So let me find a probably a better example. Control variables is any factors, various like factors that control to held constant during the experiment. Okay, so we don't change the geography, like they still like holds. So that's what is mentioned here, is what that means. So like so basically it means that like between sentence like was found still hold when the geography was controlled for. So they don't consider the geography, but the linguistic relationship still, right? They still like we will like very like still legit, like still will be relevant to the still like important to the selection here, the send downs. So the second one, so that's the second logic here. And also the conclusion here, like the get to, so they come to a conclusion that like, so that's why it's still puzzling, right? If we look at, again, that's, if you think about that related to the first introduction, right? Sundance also review evidence of purifying culture selection associated with historical bias, dividing down ancient linguistic lines. Does that make sense now? Right? So here you can see the linguistic is actually sort of like the another elements related to individual lines, right? Because it's like it equals linguistic with a historical bias. So, but geography related to what? Intergroup, right? Intergroup transmission. So that's what the office logic here. So the culture, so what is still puzzling? So why, wow, even in such like a, right, the variation here, like Sundance variation, it's also related to the, sort of like it's related to the historical bias, like the historical lines, like the linguistic lines. So that's very puzzling because we can easily make sense of like how that intergroup transmission affect the culture selection. Right. So that's the logic here. So again, that is 100%, right? But even not within that, like not, it can't reach that 100%, but can you like sort of like get the idea logic here is like the, all right, so we have two traits, right? And then like the first trait is relevant to the geography and something, the second trait is related to the linguistic. That's fine as well. But you need to be sensitive to this word, like these elements, and be able to process this information. So now let's look at a question here. A answer, right? Definitely C. That's even mentioned in the passage. So that's recycled words, right? But that's correct. So that's fine. I'm not like, so even recycle words is not like it has to be not wrong, but it must be wrong. No, right? It says correct. It is quantitative analysis. And so that's why what is quantitative analysis, right? Quantitative analysis is the statistic. So they use statistic to quantify something and do a lot of like this kind of like data analysis. And that's quantitative analysis. It's very common to use in social studies when you're like study like the similarity or differences of like different culture or like language, you can use quantitative analysis. And then question 2, the answer will be B, right? Influence. That's what like, right, what you mean here, the geography influence, mediate influence. Question 3 here, the answer will be A. Did you choose A? What does that mean, right, in that sentence? Do you understand that sentence? So if we go back to that sentence now, although culture may sometimes be a melting pot, what is a melting pot? All right. That is that common metaphor we use to describe culture. So it's like everything is highly fluid, right? Like interchange, like, or like, in such that even highly fluid situation, culture mosaic. What is mosaic? The small small tiles, like you as a decoration. So the difference between the mosaic and the like a melting pot would be like mosaic, they still have the boundary, right? They still have like this distinct boundary like that. So maybe they're naturally shaped by the historical factors that are not always obvious. So now everything makes sense, right? What does that mean? That means that like sometimes even it's highly interchangeable, like there's some culture, but some culture elements are still influenced by their own individual like linguistic or like historical bias or something, but not obvious, like not something we already like we know already. So not very obvious, still puzzling. So that's provide an image to contrast with a commonly used metaphor. That's what that means. In question 4, the purpose of the discussion pattern in the paragraph 2 is to do what? Right? That could that be set forth, right? A challenge of the study? Yeah, right. Talk about culture, and then like the last sentence talk about present a challenge, right? Remember that sentence? So that's what that means. That could make sense. Other answer just wrong. Question 5, similarity or causing, right? Remember that paragraph, right? That's relevant to that paragraph. Right, this paragraph. So if you didn't read this one very carefully, you can now go back and read it again, right? When you do the question like that, or you remember like we just read, then you can answer the question. Start checking the answers. Similar? No, they're not similar. They're not exactly the same. Language, right? That's not the main factors in the causing design. It's the answer. See, that's very clear now. Like you won't get misled by the other answer because you know that's the elements, right? That is the elements of the Mauchausen design. That's the relationship between these two elements. Correct. And then question 6, you will be easily find the evidence as well. And the answer is B. Question 7. Further relationship between is puzzling, right? They ask this question, right? So why is puzzling? A answer. So again, don't try to predict your own answer. Infer, right? Just go to the answers one by one, see which one makes sense based on the information that in the passage. It would be logical for language and geography to be correlated, but they do not. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's the logic here, right? Therefore, it is puzzling. So after he said that, like he said that it's a puzzling. So we probably didn't get that at the first place, but now you see that, yeah, that makes sense. They are correlated, but here in this sentence, they do not. The other answers, wrong, right? It doesn't have that relationship here. That is not mentioned at all, right? Do not normally language pattern, that's not mentioned. Geography is only, that's not right as well. So A answer, yeah, again, just makes sense. So that's how you choose the right answer, all right? And then like this one, of course, the answer will be the last sentence. So easier because it's a detailed question. So if you get to if you get that information, read that carefully in the passage, and you can identify the scope of that question, and without or with the evidence question, you can easily get the right answer. Question 9. That is the table, right? The graph question, like just related to the data. So the answer will be B. Oh, sorry, A. The next one. Question 10, the answer is B. The similarity between so that's according to the passage, right? The similarity between the tribes in Sundance as shown in the chart, that's attributed to. So it's actually asking about a passage, right? So we know that like the Sundance is related to the language, so not the geography, right? So we know that like the answer must be B. So see, they ask very detailed questions. So you really need to understand the relationship that is mentioned in the passage, and so that you get this question correct. Confidently get this kind of question correct. And this one is B. Right, the graph related question. So do you fully understand the article? Right, is that how you, do you also get all this information when you read the article? Right, so that's the training that we need to do right now. Like we do a bunch of like these science articles and social science articles. So you get familiar with this kind of language, and also like the information along the way you process the information. And that's the requirements again, right? You need to reach that standard in order to get all these questions correct, because they ask questions like that. So this is a harder one, but I demonstrate to you. It's hard, but it is not, it's still manageable, right? Hopefully you see that, oh, it's still manageable, still have the confidence. I know I just need practice to know how to gather the information here. But again, think about what I mentioned before, all the science, social science article, if a study report, you focus on the elements and their relationship. So be sensitive to these elements when I mention and the relationship, identify that. Sometimes, but of course you need to get familiar with like different wordings, right? Like the ways to how to say that, like the statistically consistent, right? What does that mean? Yep. Okay. So even sometimes it's hard to really understand, as long as you know that, oh, they have relationship, but they don't have relationship, right? That's fine. Even just as simple, general as that, that's fine as well. As long as I identify the right elements. Okay. That's for today. All right. So remember to send me your answers of the level 4 science. Send it by today. All right. Send it by today. Give you a deadline. And then like also you need to finish the level 3 and level 4 of the social science and send me your answers by Saturday, next Saturday. Does that make sense? So
Wait,
now, yeah.
I'm
yes.
so confused. Which one are we meant to send?
Yeah, you send the natural science one. So the natural science, the one from last week, right? The homework from last week.
Okay.
Yeah, by today. And you send the answers for today, this week's homework, which I sent it yesterday, like the social science, by next Saturday. So actually, I need you to send me your answers before the class. So that's what you need to do. All right. Okay, any other questions? Nope. Okay, great. All right, so see you Saturday, next Sunday, all right, next Sunday. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.